For 50 years, the Port of Moses Lake has been an integral part of southern Grant County and the city of Moses Lake. It has helped spur economic growth in the county, brought some of the world's most interesting aircraft to the skies above the city, and turned a possible economic disaster for the community into a thriving, bustling facility that regularly adds jobs to the local economy. The Port of Moses Lake celebrated 50 years of operations at the Grant County Airport on July 1, 2016. As the Port of Moses Lake approached its 20th birthday in 1986, it had a new executive manager in Dave Bailey. Clyde Owen had retired, and the logical choice was Bailey, who'd been at the port for 18 years.
Well, I felt comfortable assuming the position of executive manager because I was here under his tutelage for over 18 years, so I really understood not only the airport and airport operations, but I was primarily responsible for the industrial development and economic development program. So I felt very comfortable that I was well qualified to take over the position.
Bailey found Moses Lake a nice place to live when he first came to the area and decided to stay.
Moving to Seattle was not a big change for us other than the weather conditions, but coming over here was a real change for us. But the community was friendly. We were well accepted. Kids enjoyed it. So we decided, well, let's just see where the career path goes here. And so we enjoyed it, and the kids liked it here, and it was a good place to raise our two children. And
new businesses were opening at the port, including Chemicon Materials.
Well, Chemicon Materials was a company that we have been communicating with for several years. So, and what they manufactured is etched foil and aluminum foil for the capacitor industry. And finally, they just called us and said, okay, we're ready to make a decision to relocate to the United States. And do you have any facilities available? Well, fortunately, the building that they're located in was a former B-52 paint hangar. It had a lot of open space to it. Continental Can was using the facility prior to their use, and they decided that they were going to relocate their can manufacturing to Portland. So we had the space available, negotiated a rental from them. So that's how they came to Moses Lake.
One thing that drew Chemicon to Grant County was the affordable electric power available from the Grant County Public Utility District. Bailey said that it was because Grant County had the vision to build 2 hydroelectric dams on the Columbia River in the 1950s. Chemicon had some conditions, however, and one was that the port needed to become a foreign trade zone.
Chemicon had wanted to have foreign trade zone status. In essence, they wanted to make sure that their products coming in from Japan would go through an etching process or a chemical process, and then shipped back to Japan or another facility that they had here in the United States, but they didn't want to pay duty on it. So they were the very first tenant that we had that initiated the foreign trade zone here.
The Port of Moses Lake Foreign Trade Zone was a user fee port of entry zone, meaning that the port and its tenants who used the trade zone have to pay the expenses of having a U.S. customs agent at the port. The process was arduous. After obtaining the user fee port of entry status, the port had to apply to the U.S. Foreign Trade Zone Board. A 316-acre zone was finally approved in October 1994. At first, only Chemicon took advantage of the trade zone, leading the customs official at the port to say he felt like the Maytag man because he had so little to do. Dave Bailey noted at the time that it was unusual to have a foreign trade zone so far inland. Washington State currently has 11 foreign trade zones, but only one other in eastern Washington, which is at the Spokane Airport. Other companies that came to Grant County because of the affordable power and foreign trade zone were Tama Chemicals, which would later become known as Moses Lake Industries, and Union Carbide, who opened a large facility off Wheeler Road. It would later transform into REC Silicon. Another result of the port becoming a foreign trade zone was a name change to Grant County International Airport in 1997.
When we put in the foreign trade zone here, that changed a lot because we are a user-fee facility, and that necessitated that we have a full-time customs agent here in the airport. Not because we were getting a lot of international flights in here, hardly any, but it was necessitated because of the foreign trade zone and all of our users, because it required that there be a custom agent on or near where they operate. So we elected to change the name from Grant County to Grant County International Airport because we did have customs agent here. So anybody that wanted to come in here internationally, primarily through Canada, we do get quite a few charters and private and executive airplanes or business jets in here that will clear customs in here. So they can do that. Sometimes we do get some customs clearance from some international flights in here, but primarily coming in from Canada.
Japan Airlines also used the available customs facility while they were active at the port. Chemicon Industries also became the catalyst for another change at the port, the need for a wastewater facility.
The second challenge, which was kind of a real surprise to us, that they had wastewater. It was non-contact water. What we say, it didn't have any contact with their chemical process. They had a lot of wastewater that they needed to get rid of, which the city didn't have the capacity to take. So we were through several meetings with the Department of Ecology and the city and the port. We elected that this was one industry that we wanted to make sure was a success story here in Moses Lake, because it was one of our first Japanese companies other than Japan Airlines that showed interest in putting in manufacturing jobs here in this community. And so we initiated a process of putting in a whole new wastewater treatment facility at significant expense to the port, but there was some partnerships in that with the Department of, or I should say the EDC, and we got some grants and loans and things of that nature.
Chemicon at first used the city's wastewater facilities after a change in city regulations to accommodate them. But Chemicon management said that if something wasn't done, they wouldn't be able to expand their facility in Moses Lake. So, in 1997, the Port of Moses Lake decided to build a new wastewater facility located near the airport to handle industrial waste from Chemicon and other manufacturers that may want to locate at the port. The 27 million gallon facility was opened in the year 2000. The wastewater was treated and then sprinkled on 105 acres of wheat and alfalfa. At the time, the manager of Chemicon said, "Now we can safely discharge our wastewater and stay in Grant County." The treatment facility turned out to be a driver of economic development in Grant County.
So we put in a wastewater treatment facility specifically for Chemicon materials, which has proven to the port to be a great success story, because not only do we have other companies, but it was a great economic development tool for us to have this service and these facilities available for future expansion.
One example of economic development that the wastewater treatment facility made possible was Tama Chemicals, now known as Moses Lake Industries.
And they picked a spot that was just right adjacent to the airport. I think it was over 80 acres, way more than what they needed, but it was better than have too much than not enough. So they put in their first facility here. I think they had maybe about 25 people, and now they're well over, I think, 300 right now. So that was a great success story for the port. And again, they are a user of our wastewater treatment facility. So they had some wastewater discharge that they had in their process, and since we had a wastewater treatment facility that was accessible to their plant site, it came out to be a very good opportunity for us to attract that company and come into the area. So that was really our second big win with a foreign investment within this community.
Boeing and Japan Airlines continued to use the airport, which was still the core business and source of revenue at the port. Moses Lake residents were used to seeing Boeing 747s and other large commercial aircraft plying the skies over the city. At one time, 2 747s that were destined to become Air Force One aircraft were briefly at the airport for flight testing. Because of its long runway, the airport was even named by NASA to be an emergency landing site for the space shuttle. It was never required to be used as such during the 30 years of the Space Shuttle program. Big Bend Community College had an accredited pilot training course that used part of the airport.
Primarily, the Big Bend Community College flight training program has a big impact on the port. Not so much as that we get a lot of revenue from it, because they're mostly single and some twin engine, so it's not a revenue producer for us in some respects. But the key factor for us, it keeps the traffic count up. And they do a lot of landings. I mean, if you have a fleet of roughly 26 aircraft in their training fleet, then that's going to generate a lot of touch and go traffic in here. And what's important about that is if we can continue to show need for the use of facilities, then the Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA, will continue providing air traffic control services here at the port.
In 1955, the Port of Moses Lake decided it was time to build a new passenger air terminal, as the old one was becoming inadequate.
Well, the existing terminal that we had was the old base operations building here from the Air Force. And I believe its original construction was maybe in the early 40s. It was pretty old. But it did have the existing control tower within that facility, and that was the control tower that Larson Air Force Base was using when it was operational here. At that point in time, we were getting air service from Horizon Airlines, and that service just continued to grow and grow. And we had a terminal area that was extremely small, and it was very difficult to do passenger loadings with the new security regulations and X-ray equipment. We just never had any real good space for them.
The FAA had committed to building a new air traffic control tower 2,000 feet north of the old terminal building, replacing the control tower that had been built by the Air Force in 1950. The cost of the new terminal was $3.3 million.
At that point in time, the old control tower that was here when Larson Air Force Base was active was so antiquated. No ADA accessibility whatsoever. So the FAA decided they were going to build a new control tower, which they did out in the midfield. So that really made this existing control tower non-functional and had no use whatsoever, because it was all stairs, no elevators, nothing. So it was just wasted space.
Something needed to be done about a new terminal building, but there were challenges that had to be met first.
Primarily, the commission was somewhat divided on where we wanted to go with the terminal. Some thought that it would be better just to remodel the existing facility, enlarge the terminal area for the commuter airline, and just leave everything else that it is. We did some analysis of that proposal and determined that with all of the amount of asbestos that we had in the existing facility, asbestos abatement, it wouldn't be cost effective to just remodel the existing building. All of the siding was asbestos. The tile was all asbestos, so we started getting into remodeling. We would have some significant challenges on just asbestos abatement.
It became obvious that a new facility was a better option than remodeling the old one.
So after some due diligence of the commission and the port staff, we elected that we would just go ahead and tear down the existing building and build a new terminal building.
The port decided to build a new 30,000 square foot terminal in place of the old terminal building at a cost of $5.7 million. Construction began in 1996 and was completed in February 1998. The terminal was dedicated on April 2, 1998, in a ceremony attended by then Governor Mike Lowry. The Columbia Basin Herald said that the new terminal made the port a world-class facility. The new terminal building would accommodate the continued growth of Horizon Airlines. The hope was that the terminal would last 20 years, providing passenger service to the people of Grant County, even with anticipated growth of passengers. But that didn't work out.
But when Horizon switched from the Metroliners to the Q200s, which was around 19 passengers, and then from the 100 to the 200, then that went up to 40 passengers. We just didn't have enough growth here in Moses Lake to accommodate that much of a increase of capacity. So they elected to pull their service from Moses Lake, and they did this from a number of other communities. And then Big Sky out of Montana was providing service to us for quite a while out of here. And then they were still here when I left, but after I left, they decided that they were going to discontinue service here. So that was somewhat of a disappointment that we put a big investment into the terminal building, and it was being very heavily utilized at that time, but just because of increased the size of aircraft, and passenger loadings and things of this nature, we do not have commuter service here at the airport.
SkyWest and United Express tried to provide passenger service to Moses Lake after Horizon left, but it didn't last because the passengers weren't there. All commercial air service finally ended in 2010.
Well, I mean, aircraft size increased, and the community wasn't growing that quick that we could get into that capacity, although I think that we could do it now. The other competition was that I-90 freeway. I mean, you have a major hub airport that's only 100 miles away at Spokane. So a lot of people just said, I can drive an hour and 15 minutes, and go to Spokane and have more of a selection on where I want to go. SeaTac was only, 3 hours away if you really wanted to get into some of the international flights. You could drive to SeaTac. So the I-90 freeway very much was a competitor to us on keeping air service here.
In 1993, Grant County Airport was named Airport of the Year for the Northwest region.
But in 1993, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, named the Airport of the Year for the Northwest region. And that was primarily because of our efforts that we were doing in fire training. We established a fire training facility here at the airport for all airports in the Northwest.
The Port of Moses Lake was named Port of the Year in 1998 by the Washington Public Ports Association. At the time, there were 68 port districts in the state that the Port of Moses Lake was competing against for that honor. The association cited the port's success in recruiting business and industry, its innovative intergovernmental partnerships, the building of the wastewater facility, and the construction of a new terminal building.
And that gave recognition to the port through the port industries that, we were a leader within port industries in promoting economic and development and job creation here for the local area. You got to remember there's 10 port districts in Grant County, so So we are very limited in our jurisdiction, but we provided a lot of job creation.
The port also received national media attention. Radio personality Paul Harvey delivered a national radio salute to the port in 1997 after a visit to Moses Lake, and the New York Times wrote an article about the port describing how this remote little town survived and prospered after the closing of Larson Air Force Base. In 1999, another large industry came to Moses Lake. Genie Industries, a builder of man lifts based in Redmond, Washington, was looking for more space and lower costs. It started with a phone call from a real estate agent.
Genie was an unusual industrial development project. I remember taking the call from a real estate agent out of Olympia, and he asked, he was aware of our facilities over here, and he says, do you still have those big hangar buildings that were used for the B-52s when they were being delivered to the Boeing company? And I said, well, yeah, we do. I think we had 3 of the 4 bays empty. One bay was being used for sawdust storage or something. So anyway, I gave some information to this real estate agent. Never met him, just talked to him on the telephone, and sent him some information on the buildings. Within a week, I got a call from Redmond, identifying that Genie had an interest in these facilities. So they all drove over here one day. There was about 5 or 6 of them.
A Genie spokesman at the time said, "We need space, people, and a good workforce. Moses Lake has all of that and more." Also, Moses Lake is more seismically stable than the Seattle area, and that figured into Genie's decision. The large hangars at the port were the main draw.
And what was very attractive to them is that they had very high ceilings, a lot of open space. Each bay had about 82,000 square feet of open space, and then there was a number of engineering administrative offices between the bays that could be used for production management and things of this nature. So after, I would say about 2 or 3 months of negotiation, we struck a deal, and they were going to come to Moses Lake.
But there were challenges the port faced with situating Genie in those hangars that were designed to hold B-52 bombers.
It was a tough project for the port, is that these buildings were all designed in the mid-50s. So the fire protection system was geared for aircraft type fire protection. The heating system in the building was 2 oil-fired boilers. It was a very antiquated system. The standby electrical generators were not state-of-the-art. So the port had a lot of work to do to bring this facility up to an acceptable manufacturing standards to Genie, which included a lot of asbestos abatement, totally bringing up the fire protection system to existing standards. We put in a number of, or 2 standby generators, if I remember correctly, at least 1 standby generator, and completely redid the heating system from oil-fired to natural gas. So it was a big challenge, but it was a real plus for us that we brought this facility up to acceptable standards, and in which they've been using the facility and hiring up to sometimes 1,200 people at their max.
Once Genie was in place, it provided good living wage jobs in Moses Lake.
Well, just the employment itself was a significant impact for Moses Lake, and these are all manufacturing jobs, so they're better than what I would say minimum wage. These were all skilled jobs, and primarily they had a lot of requirements for welding skills, which they could use Big Bend Community College for some of their training programs here. And you need to recognize what's the purpose of the Port District. The Port District's primarily objective is to economic development and job creation, and this fit exactly what we were trying to accomplish for this community. And when you take a look at 1,200 jobs in this community, that's a significant impact to the economy here.
By 2002, the Port of Moses Lake was 37 years old and had had only 2 executive managers, Clyde Owen and Dave Bailey. The 3-person commission had also seen remarkable stability. Leon Bodie served on the Port Commission from 1965 until 1998, 3 years before he passed away. Other commissioners, such as Dean Haggerty, Floyd Rigsby, Dan Dunn, and Larry Peterson, would serve for more than a decade. In 2002, it was the end of an era at the Port of Moses Lake when Dave Bailey retired.
Well, in 2002, I turned 62. So, and at that point in time, we were going through a lot of TSA security programs, issues, things of this nature that I was just I was just getting to the point, well, do I have to do any more of this stuff? So I decided that, if I stayed on another 2 or 3 years, what was going to be the benefits of it? And I decided that I was going to just go ahead and retire in 2002, which I don't regret. So, and then they went ahead and elected or hired David Senny as my replacement.
The port had accomplished a lot in the 30 years Bailey worked there.
I think the greatest achievements that we can say is not me, David M. Bailey, but the port, is that we really expanded the industrial development base here in the greater Moses Lake area.
Not only did the Port of Moses Lake bring industry to the port, they were also responsible for bringing other industries that located around Moses Lake.
And you got to recognize that there was a number of firms that came to this community that did not locate on the port, but they came here through the promotion and the efforts of the Port of Moses Lake. And REC is one of them. They first came here as Union Carbide. We did the site selection report for them when they were looking for a site for their polycrystalline silicone plant. They located on private property, no direct income or benefit to the Port District other than they went on the tax rolls. National Frozen Foods was another project that the port worked on extensively, bringing them into Moses Lake, again located on private property, but again that was an agricultural based company that came to this community, went on the tax rolls, hired a lot of people, but no direct benefit or income to the port other than we do get property tax from them.
After Dave Bailey retired, the Port of Moses Lake hired David Senny, who came from the Hattiesburg-Laurel Regional Airport in Mississippi. In 2003, the Port of Moses Lake nearly doubled the size of its taxing district by annexing 360 square miles into the district. The area was northeast of the original Port District and one of the few areas in Grant County not in a Port District. Residents there voted 56% in favor of being annexed. Senny left in 2004 to run for mayor of Hattiesburg. He was replaced by Craig Baldwin, who came from the Rogue Valley International Airport in Medford, Oregon. In 2009, another era closed at the Port of Moses Lake. Japan Airlines announced they were going to stop training pilots at Grant County International Airport. A 40-year relationship came to an end. With the new Boeing 787 Dreamliner, JAL decided they could train their pilots at Oita Airport in southern Japan, which would save them the expense of sending every flight crew to Moses Lake. While this made economic sense to the company, it was a blow to the Port of Moses Lake, because they would lose the revenue from the landing fees JAL paid. But it was also an emotional loss for the community. JAL had been part of Moses Lake for 40 years. Over 10,000 members of flight crews had trained in Moses Lake, and hundreds if not thousands of relationships were formed. Moses Lake had adopted Yonezawa, Japan as a sister city, and named a street Yonezawa Boulevard. 40 years is a nice run for any relationship, and we're just glad we've had them, said Doug Sly, president of the Moses Lake Sister City Commission. Japan Airlines affected Moses Lake in many ways. For 30 of the 40 years they were here, they took every 6th grader in the community on a flight to show them Moses Lake and Grant County from the air. It is estimated 21,000 children enjoyed these tours. JAL would also fly 5 Moses Lake High School students in addition to adult chaperones to Japan every year. In total, about 190 students made the trip. And the Moses Lake community gave back to the people of Japan. Big Bend Community College started a program where Japanese farmers were brought to the Columbia Basin to learn American agricultural techniques. By 1986, more than 2,800 Japanese farmers had participated in the program. On May 27, 2005, the city of Moses Lake officially opened a Japanese peace garden just off of downtown. At the time, Parks and Recreation Director Spencer Grigg called it a peaceful oasis in the middle of the community. It's not a complicated place, just peaceful and quiet, Grigg said. It is probably safe to say that even with Japan Airlines no longer in Moses Lake, Japan and its culture will long influence the community. Economic development continued at the port in conjunction with the Grant County Economic Development Council. SGL Automotive Carbon Fiber Group, in a joint venture with German automaker BMW, built a plant adjacent to port property and uses the port's wastewater facility. SGL was attracted to Moses Lake by affordable power and the port's foreign trade zone. The factory produces carbon fiber to be used in cars manufactured by BMW. Another Japanese company, Osterreal, that manufactures a nutrition supplement, located near the port and also uses the port's wastewater facility. Although not on or near the port of Moses Lake, the port did assist Eka Chemicals, National Frozen Foods, and Basic American Foods to locate in the Moses Lake area, contributing more to the local economy. And, once again having a connection to Japan, in July 2014, a new resident at the port, Aerotech, announced that it had contracted with Mitsubishi Aircraft Corporation to do all the U.S. flight testing of the Mitsubishi Regional Jet, or MRJ. The MRJ needs U.S. certification because of the 400 orders for the aircraft, many were with U.S. Airlines. To accommodate Mitsubishi, Aerotech constructed a $9 million hangar at the airport. The new wide-body hangar is 65,000 square feet and was built adjacent to the new ramp at the airport on land leased from the port. Also, Mitsubishi would bring to the Moses Lake area around 200 engineers and support personnel. A September 17, 2015 editorial by Emily Braunwert of the Grant County Economic Development Council noted that, with the arrival of the MRJ engineers, Japanese-owned companies accounted for 8% of the total employment in the Moses Lake zip code. The first MRJ arrived in Moses Lake on September 28, 2016. It all started during World War II, when Moses Lake Army Airfield was opened to train bomber pilots to replace those being lost due to precision daylight bombing in Germany and later Japan. Then the airfield became a full-fledged Air Force base, with a fighter group tasked with protecting Grand Coulee Dam and the Hanford Nuclear Reservation from Soviet bombers. Later, after it was named Larson Air Force Base, it became a Strategic Air Command base, with nuclear-armed B-52 bombers and KC-135 Stratotankers to refuel the bombers on their way to Russia in case the Cold War turned hot. When the base was closed by the Pentagon in 1964, it could have been an economic disaster for the city of Moses Lake. But rather than let the town die, residents came together to form the Port of Moses Lake. No one knew at the time what contributions to the economy and culture of Moses Lake the port would bring. Japan Airlines trained flight crews for 40 years in Moses Lake. Boeing still flight tests and trains at the airport. Residents of Moses Lake could get some of the first glimpses by any one of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner simply by looking up when they heard the sound of a jet overhead. The military still uses Grant County International Airport for training C-17 cargo jet crews. In the fire season, the airport is a base for planes, used to dump fire retardant ahead of forest fires. And Big Bend Community College still has a flight program, training the pilots of the future. Did the original port commissioners, Leon Bodie, Floyd Rigsby, and Dan Dunn, ever dream how their vision for the port of Moses Lake would play out? Did they realize what an economic driver in the community the port would become in the future? And would they have dreamed about how vitally important the port of Moses Lake would be to the community and residents of Moses Lake and South Grant County? The port of Moses Lake has been more to the community than simply a taxing district. It has been a vital and dynamic part of Moses Lake and its economy, and, it is hoped, will be for decades to come.